Hi, AP Langenkamp. All right, so I promised I would send you a screen recording of the PowerPoint that I gave today, so when you're at home, you can look over it again. We talked about how to write an abstract for your APA paper, which is something you can do even if you haven't finished, filling in all the parts of your paper. So those of you in period 2 who won't get your papers back until Friday, you can still work on this. All right, so an abstract is a concise statement of your research paper. So it essentially is a condensed version of a full paper. It states the purpose, the methods, and the findings of your research project. Essentially, what an abstract is used for is it goes in databases, scientific databases, or research databases, so that people who are looking for sources for studies that they're doing can have a quick and easy way of like going through a bunch of studies and determining whether or not they think those studies will be useful for them in their own research. So it makes sense that it is a complete summary of your paper. Now, there are 4 C's that we keep in mind when we're writing abstracts. It has to be complete. So it needs to cover everything about your paper, including the conclusion. So like I said in class, if you're one of those people who thinks like, I don't want to give it all away, the abstract is supposed to give it all away. So your conclusion and the findings of your paper should be right there in the abstract from the very start. Concise. So there's not a lot of excess wordiness or unnecessary information. So for those of you who like the floweriness of creative writing, this is not the place for that. It's extremely scientific, it's extremely to the point and factual. So you want to take out any kind of excess stuff. This is not a place for rhetorical strategies at all, other than stating the facts. It is clear, meaning it is well organized, not too jargon laden, which means that, for example, if you look at some abstracts from the scientific community, you have to have like a degree in metaphysics in order to understand some of the things that are said in there. This should really be, if it's not scientific, it's not incredibly technical, like this paper shouldn't be. This paper should really be a reflection of, like the abstract should really be a reflection of the kind of person that you want to be able to research and use your paper. So probably fellow high school students. So think about what kind of language you would use for them. If you do need to use jargon at all, you need to clarify that jargon in the abstract, what it means. Cohesive means that it has a good flow between the 3 different parts, and I'm going to cover those right now. So your research abstract should have a list of key terms. And as you'll see when I show you the example at the end of this PowerPoint, the key terms are like the basic topics that are covered within your paper. You want to think of this as like the terms that someone would put into a Google search engine or a database search engine in order to find your paper. So, for example, if you are researching the Republican Party or changes in the Republican Party, you would put in Republican Party. You would put in political evolution, might be a term. You could put in political commercials or political campaigns is something that probably a lot of people are going to have in their key terms. But then also things that are specific to your paper in general. So I'll talk about those in a minute. You also need to have your paper's title and you as the author listed. So title and author information. You're writing about yourself in the third person. So if I write a paper included politics and power, how the rise to power indicates a change in politics, my abstract would begin with politics and power, how a rise to power indicates a change in politics by Heidi Dunn is an article that covers blah, blah, blah. Okay? You want to introduce the purpose of your paper. So what is it that your paper is trying to prove? What do you want people to get out of the paper? That should be early on in the abstract. Methods of research. So the next thing that you have to do is you have to explain what kind of sources you used to write your paper. And if you did any field research, what kind of field research you conducted. So for example, if you conducted a survey, if you observed people in different situations, then you would explain what the situation was, what the survey was all about, and you would include the results of the field research as well. And then finally, you include conclusions that you come to throughout your paper. Okay, so that's what you have to have in your research abstract. So before you decide that your abstract is done and ready to go, this should be like the most error-free, hard to say, portion of your paper. meaning no mechanical, no spelling errors. It needs to be perfect because if anything, this might be the only thing that you ever get published in your life is an abstract for your paper. So before you finalize it, get help from a mentor, meaning someone who's written an abstract before. That would include any senior or person who's taken AP language and composition. So if you have an older brother or sister to look over your abstract and make sure that you're on the right track. You can have me, but I'd prefer you actually get help elsewhere. Anyone who's ever gotten a master's degree, therefore any of your teachers, maybe some of your parents, they've all written abstracts for APA formatted papers. So get help from someone who's written an APA abstract before. Make revisions based upon the feedback that you get from people. And then finally, have people check over this draft before you turn it in the last time. And I mean your entire draft of your paper. Remember, you have a section on the rubric where I give you a grade based on your revision. So if, for example, you know that there's been large gaps of time where you haven't added or changed or revised your paper because you've been doing other things, to provide outside proof that you've gotten like work or revision suggestions would be a really good idea for your grade. So if you have a 10-day break without working on your paper, but when you turn in your major paper 3, draft 3, you also turn in a draft that's you had someone else peer edit for you and write things on, and that proves to me that you've had thought about it and had some revisions done, that's going to be mean good things for your grade in that category. All right, so some writing tips. First of all, active voice is better than passive voice. So I give you an example here. Dunn conducted a survey of 100 students as opposed to over 100 students and teachers were surveyed. Active means that you begin with the person who did the activity as the subject. Dunn conducted the survey, you don't begin with the people who the action was done upon, aka the students and teachers. Then, if you're ever using wanting to use an abbreviation, GOP, for example, or McHenry High School, you refer to it first in the full term. So in your abstract, you might say, a study was conducted at McHenry High School, and then afterwards you would put in parentheses MCHS. Then every other time you refer to MCHS or McHenry High School in your paper, you can use it by its acronym, MCHS, or instead of Grand Old Party, GOP, and therefore it is clarified right away in your abstract. Only one thought per sentence, all unnecessary words gone. You want to get it down to the bare basics, and then make sure that your verb tenses stay consistent. So if you start in past tense, stay in past tense. Dunn conducted a survey, everything else should be in past tense. Okay, here is my sample abstract. So I've got my key terms listed at the top: electoral elections, which is really bad. I'm going to change that. Political elections, it should be. Fact checking and negative political ads. So the paper, here's what it says. First of all, you want to make sure that you have your key terms listed at the top, separated by commas, nothing capitalized except for the K in key and the T in terms. Then right underneath that, you're going to be starting to type your abstract. Notice that up here, where it starts with the paper, it is not indented. The first paragraph of your abstract is not indented. If you go on to a second paragraph, which you should when you jump over to the results or the conclusions, you do indent it. So here it is. The paper Fact Checks a Growing Industry by Heidi Dunn proves that electoral campaigns are dynamic, and an important change in recent elections is the growth of fact-checking, the assessment of the truthfulness of political advertisements by news media organizations and watchdog groups. In this essay, Dunn examines the role that fact checks play in shaping citizens' views of negative commercials and political candidates. Dunn's research focused on examining slogans, commercials, and stump speeches of the 2012 presidential candidates, Barack Obama and Mitt Romney. All right, so here is my purpose and focus of the piece. Here is where I got my information from. And then for my fake paper, I also did my own survey. So here's the next part about my field research. The findings rely on an internet survey experiment where she varied people's exposure to negative advertisements and a follow-up fact-check article. Now, that's the end of that. So I've got information about my research and my methods in here, a little brief introduction to what the paper is about and the purpose of the paper. And now I go into the results and conclusion. The results of the experiment show that fact checks influence people's assessments of the accuracy, usefulness, and tone of negative political ads. Furthermore, sophisticated citizens and citizens with low tolerance for negative campaigning are most responsive to fact checks. The fact checks also sway citizens' likelihood of accepting the claims made in the advertisements. Finally, negative fact checks, for example, fact checks challenging the truthfulness of the claims of the negative commercial, are more powerful than positive fact checks. There it is. That's an abstract, so it's a little, if I read this whole paper, you would find that it would have some maybe interesting information in it. Okay, I hope that helps and that you have used this in a way that'll help you kind of get your paper taken care of. If you have any questions, feel free to email me.